This is a re-recording of a game that I did earlier today. When I loaded it, apparently there was an audio issue that was not properly resolved. So if you're hearing some things that are a little off or what have you, I'm sorry. I got a new computer, as I had explained at the beginning of the video, which you could not hear, that there could be some problems that did occur or could occur. And so I'm going to go ahead and do this over again. So bear with me. I know that it's not a surprise for me who wins, how it goes, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to try and hit the same highlights that I hit the first time around and all that good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and switch over so we can see the match. As you can see, there's some supply blocks and some other things. This is a Diamond 2 low, or sorry, not Diamond 2, geez. A low Diamond 3 gameplay, high Platinum 1. I believe Plat 1 is around 3,200, a little bit less than that, while Diamond 3 is obviously 3,300 and up. It gets into about 3,400, 3,500 before you start to move into Diamond 2. So we do have a ZVP. One of the things I did fail in that first video is to name both players. Roteleks, I butchered it the first time. I'm butchering it again. And PYY or Pwy, I don't know. I'm going to butcher that too. So I did that the first time as well. So we're going to go ahead and immediately jump into the game so I can go ahead and hit up the game and we can talk about it. It is on Amphion LE. I think that's how you pronounce it. It has a relatively short game at 7 minutes and 20 seconds. The submitter was the blue Terran, who had wanted to know how to improve their build. So I'm going to focus primarily on improving this cheese that they went for. The things that I noted the very first time watching this in was that they had pauses in their production around workers. It is okay to oversaturate your main. 18 is when you start to have maybe I think it's 18 is where you start to have a decrease in actual income that's significant enough that it's not worth building more workers. But if you're getting your natural or the next base, it's okay to continue to build them. With regards to this build order, there's gaps in production, so timing wise and things of that nature. So you can see they went with a double gas at the point that they started the barracks. The downside with this is you stop production on SCVs, so your income is lower than it could be. And then what we'll eventually see, because I have this is me going through this again, we will see that there's an oversaturation of gas in multiple points, where the way that the player ends up doing things, the Terran does things, doesn't line up very well. So basically, to improve the build, there's some tweaking that needs to be done with when you start your gas, making sure you have your production of SCVs constant. If you're going to send down a worker to the lower, in this specific map, ground to wall off, you need to send it a little earlier. You didn't do any kinds of scouts, because if you're going to get a 12 pool, you're just dead. You're cheesing on a 1 base right now. And if your opponent had 12 pooled, this is the same thing that happens to a lot of Protosses. They just don't know how to handle a 12 pool. This build, you would just lose. Other things of note, you don't want to do this lift off and move thing. Like, look at your money right now. We have 150, 160. What are we producing? Where's the unit to produce it? What's the next step? You can start your factory already. So why don't we? Your wall's incomplete. You're playing against a Zerg. They could have speedlings coming at you very soon. Why is it not complete? Or why are you not on your way to complete it? Obviously, like, yeah, okay, cool. Why are you sending a worker from all the way over here to all the way over here when this one finishes to finish that wall? Basically, you need to send your workers earlier. You need to be on top of the sequencing of what you're doing. Also, things to note is when you see that, when you don't see the Overlord, make sure you're scouting appropriately for it. Your timing was way late with sending out that Marine. You're better off probably going with a Reaper with this specific build, especially since you're floating a bunch of gas at this point, even though you have basically everything you're looking for. Are there other things that you could do to improve it, such as like adding in Cloak? That could be very dangerous for an opponent that doesn't have the appropriate vision. Like, you didn't need to build your factory in the low ground. You could have put it up here, tipped your opponent off, making it so they want to go roaches earlier and sooner. Since you're going ghost, you can snipe them, and you're able to build a much more robust army. Getting your natural sooner Eventually what we'll see is you're going to be on about 24 or so workers, and your opponent gets to like 50 some, and if you don't do 50 some workers, or sorry, 20 some workers of damage at the same amount of time, you're not going to catch up. You're going to be behind by that much if they survive the push. Excuse me. You also had supply caps at times, which means that you're not sequencing your buildings and units properly. So essentially, when you're getting close to a supply cap moment, right now is close because of the way that you're sequenced your units and buildings. You should have a supply depot under construction. Otherwise, you're going to hit a supply cap. And what we'll see here in a minute, if I recall correctly, is you actually hit a supply cap because you're building out of 1, 2, 3 buildings, 4 buildings if you're being on top of it. And that makes it so that you can't produce, you just like can't build your dropship. Your next Hellions isn't under construction. You've queued up Hellions, which means you have enough resources to build your command center, but without that, right? And now you're just stuck with a bunch of units that can't be produced. Since you're doing a cheese, you might want to hide things. Like you might want to take all of these ghosts and not put them at the front wall. You want to put it like further back, like maybe here or so that they have to sacrifice that overlord to find out what you're doing versus just losing a ling and finding it out. Also, the location of the Ghost Academy, while I understand you're filling in the wall, you might want to be like do something like behind the mineral line or in a very odd location, like way over here, actually like probably over here between your natural and main, so that way your opponent can't see it with their overlord that's going to take a path from, generally speaking, from over here across, right? They're gonna come where the camera is, and they come across your base. You could completely stop that from ever occurring, and that way, when the Ling or the equivalency scout out front of another overlord comes through, you are like hidden super far back in the back, so they have no idea that you have a Ghost Academy. Again, sequencing of building locations, sequencing of timing, SimCity, how you're doing it. Like you have another 200 minerals you're just sitting on, and you're going to run into a supply cap again. Little things to just improve. On the other side of the map, your opponent is doing a massive job of building workers. As I said, they're going to get to 50 while you're at 24. That means you are behind by 26 workers of income, and your opponent is that far ahead. And that means if you do not kill them, they will win. Or you have to be ultra efficient, which and then like also putting things like supply drop on supply depots is just like, unless it's extremely intentional because you cannot afford it, you can afford it, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, then you need to like you should never do that. Also, if you're queuing up things, it means that you're limiting that income. This should be an orbital. You have too much money floating. You don't have ghost continuous production. You don't have cloak or nuke at this point, so on and so forth. Basically, if you're going to do a 1 base in or a 2 base all in cheese, your money should never, ever, ever, ever be this high. You should be. Imagine if you had 7 more Hellions right now. Imagine if you had 3 more ghosts and 2 more Hellions. If you think this is hard to handle for your opponent, which, by the way, I know that you're microing on the other side of the map. It was really cool. You killed a bunch of queens. You're really smart about it. For those of you that are watching, I know this is my second time through, so I'm going to jump back through and show you what ended up happening because he did just such a good job with it. Basically, he did a good job of killing off a bunch of lings, not losing any ghosts, managing it, sniping a bunch of roaches, which is value right there. Not killing them, but sniping them, which makes them completely lower. Your queens are going to have to be in the situation, etc. If I was the Zerg player, I would have moved my queens up here to make it so that they can't land in a dead zone. And then you can see that he's being ultra efficient, which is so good, right? He's just killing all of these queens basically for free. A little bit of health, a little bit of energy, no big deal. That makes it so that this attack is very, very, very strong in about a minute. A little less than a minute, it's about 30 seconds or so. Excuse me, sorry, I have pneumonia and I'm trying to get over this. I've been sick for about 2 weeks and that, yeah, it's great. So just like things to think about. Also, because you've attacked from this angle right here multiple times, time to go attack from a different angle, like up over here, That way you can get workers, so your Ghost can be busy doing things while your Hellion army is pushing the front. Like, imagine if you destroyed all these workers at the same time that this battle was going on. Obviously, you kept your army in here. You did a decent job of controlling. It could be better. You didn't, like, properly protect the Ghosts. Your opponent didn't properly focus them down. You did end up losing 2 Ghosts, if I recall correctly. Yeah, there's one because that one was over microed all the way out here. And then I think one of the other ones go down here. But point being is also that was an awesome job using the Marauder and 1 snipe to kill that queen. Mwah. On the other side of things, for the Zerg player, they did a great job of seeing, oh my goodness, they're going mech. Let's just macro hard as hell. They also did a good job of putting stuff out for scouting. They're very attentive to a lot of really good things. The downside is that they didn't do a really good job of injecting, and they didn't do a really good job of saying, oh crap, I'm under attack, and switching. And they didn't pull their workers to fight when they were getting all-in, and they were unable to identify that they were getting all-in. I do like this scout. I probably would have... I don't know. This is a hard... This map's really funny with regards to the amount of distance that this Overlord has to cover. So, like, sending it over here and then seeing the Ghost Academy would change this game dramatically. And as the Terran, you saw the Overlord. Like, you need to get that Marine, like, over here as soon as possible so you can start killing it. Regardless, it's... the Zerg did a bunch of really good things. If they thought they were playing against a normal opponent, they just weren't playing against a normal opponent. And then once they realized they weren't playing against a normal opponent, they didn't take the appropriate steps to protect themselves. They basically over-macroed when they needed to build a lot more army, and they needed to, like, literally find out what the army composition was. This is very early on. This is perfectly fine. They're doing nothing wrong. I would be very scared that I'm getting proxied right now, and I would send one of these lings over and make sure that I'm not. Personally, right? I would literally just take one of these lings and be like, hey, move the front, make sure there's some units there. Cool. And then I would have found the Ghost Academy really quick. Because my Overlord didn't see the high ground wall off. I don't know if they walled off the bottom. So you can see, they have no idea. They know that they have 2 gases. So this is where it's like, alright, time to build an extra Overlord and sack it. And they just didn't do that. So they have no idea if this is walled. They have no idea if they're about to get proxied. It is late enough in the game that you're going to get like 20 Marines and 2 tanks in your face, and they're going to have a short reinforcement distance, and they could win the game if it was a 1 base all-in located proxy. If they like snuck 2 barracks and a factory right here, just game over. You can't. You're just done, right? So there is obviously improvements for everybody, but just a few things to like kind of articulate what was going on, all that kind of stuff. It is awesome that you took the W, but the thing that you have to think about long term with a build is when I start getting to the point where you're playing against opponents that don't make mistakes or that don't make mistakes unless you force them to have mistakes. This is Masters and GM kind of level of thought processes. Obviously, are not at that level. You're already making mistakes by supply capping yourself inappropriately. That's a problem, right? You can't ever supply cap yourself if your opponent doesn't pressure you. If you do, that means that your build isn't refined enough and you don't have enough practice on it. Go practice against some NPCs or continue to practice against players, but you're in a situation where your build isn't clean enough that you're ready to get to that upper level of play yet. Other things to note with regards to that thought process is like, what is my opponent doing and how would they be ahead of me? You're playing against a Diamond 3 player. That's your opponent. They're floating 1,000 resources at 5 minutes. I can tell you that Diamond 1 players, unless you force them to because you're just being so aggressive, or you're doing a lot of really cool things to like really hamper them as they're playing, they're not going to float that many resources. Heck, in Diamond 3, I'm surprised that you guys are floating that many resources. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, go watch your replays. If you ever float more than 500 of any resource ever, it means you lost that game. In your mind. Unless, of course, you're maxed out or you're getting ready to tech switch, or like, unless you have a very, very specific plan for what you're doing with regards to it. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. You can also see that your ratio for spend is way, way off. Well, not terribly, obviously, but it's not great, right? Gas should be your limiter, because gas is the one that you can't mine as fast. So what this is telling me is that you missed putting your workers on our mineral line earlier on than you should have. This also tells me that you were that you're not properly maximizing the limitation that is the gas production that you generated in this game. You're nowhere near maxed out, so why are you loading 1,000 plus resources? Same question for your opponent, obviously. I mean, you're microing fine. When you get to those higher levels, when you get better at the game, I'm still working on it. You just can't do that, right? Like, are you flicking, and I'm just clicking numbers on my keyboard, right? Are you quickly going through and doing your production cycle while you're microing, right? Do your micro with the ghost, cycle, 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 make sure you have all the things being produced, back to ghost control. Cycle, 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 so on and so forth. And that's just like one of those kind of things where you got to be... The reason that people that are really good at musical instruments, that are really good at StarCraft, generally speaking, is because of that pattern recognition and that repetition of hit the A key, hit the cycle so that I'm hitting the thing that I need to make it sound right, and things like that. Like, that's what's going on for where that comes from, is because when you're playing a musical instrument, you're these same like 4 repetitious things, and you're listening to the drum beat and you're paying attention to that constant pattern. And this is something that a lot of people don't pick up on in the game of StarCraft, right? So like a constant cycle would be make the SCV, make the Marine, make the make your SCV, your command center upgrade, do your command center thing, do your barracks thing, do your factory thing, do your starport thing, do your upgrades thing, make sure you have your supply good, go back, go manage army, make SCVs, barracks, factory, starport, and etc., right? And of course, the upgrades aren't every cycle. It's like every 5th or 4th or whatever, depending on which upgrades they are, and blah, 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 blah. The point I'm attempting to articulate is that you need to get in your own head to make it so that you have a beat, that you're always going to hit things at the specific times when they're supposed to occur. Your build order is not refined enough to do that. You had 100 gas, and you stopped producing SCVs for a long period of time. If you had delayed one of these refineries, or made one refinery earlier and delayed the second one more, you would have more minerals and the same amount of gas, or you'd have more minerals and you'd be able to spend the gas that you've gathered between those slight adjustments that you're making. Obviously, that means that your build order isn't refined. And that's where you kind of got to think about, how do I make my build order better? That's where you go to build order tools and things of that nature. And that's where you practice making sure that you always have that SCV under production, making sure you drop your mules properly, making sure you scout properly so you can adjust your build. So once you have that build really refined, with this specific path, if you get 0 information and you are thinking you're going to win specifically on your build, that's one path, right? That's the like pillar of the tree. The branches are where you scout something and you say, oh, they built this early, I need to instead build this unit and go up this tree, this part of the branch of the tree. And that's where the knowledge of having a specific build comes in. A lot of people, even in Masters, don't understand that concept, or they haven't mastered that idea. And that's kind of one of those things where you since you're building your own build, which is cool, and it's really hard to do, and it makes it so you're off meta, and you're going to beat a lot of people that aren't expecting it, and you're going to lose to a lot of people that just execute the meta really well. Just to be very clear, like, those two things happen. And they usually balance out a little bit if you have really good control, which you showed us that you had pretty decent control with your units. You didn't lose any ghosts until the game was essentially over, right? And you lost that one ghost that ran up here and it was out of energy. And you lost that one medevac. That shouldn't have been lost. You should have pulled it back. That being said, those two things, that's where you can improve on your micro significantly. But I'm nitpicking I'm not trying to be like too harsh on you, right? I don't. That's not the point of this. The point is that you have a higher level of skill in your micro than your macro. If you can fix your macro skill level, your MMR will just shoot up like a rocket. And right now, the reason that your macro is suffering is three pieces. One, you're off meta, so you're building your own build, and your build isn't refined. Two, your build, while it may be great and works well occasionally, it doesn't do certain things like make sure that you're constantly producing things and make sure that you have a good balance of things. Again, refinement and execution, right? The execution would be non-constant production of SCVs, idle SCVs, things of that nature. Again, not refined. Those two pieces are like very close hand in hand. I like to just separate them a little bit, because if you have idle SCVs, because you did something like, oh, I sent my SCV to build this building, but I didn't rally it back to a mineral patch after it was done by holding shift, that's just bad macro. Or queuing buildings one after another when it does not make sense because you can't do it or whatever. Not being on top of that cycle, like that attention when it's time to build that next building. Sending the then you get into the third piece, which is your Sim City. This is where I was talking about hiding your Ghost Academy, putting it right here in this situation. Not having the wall off proper, having the wall, if you had the wall here, cool. Making sure that you send your SCV early if you're going to do it in a far location. Knowing the exact times on each map where that timing is. Making sure that you're doing those slight adjustments. Making sure that you don't get Nidus wormed, right? If you'd be dead if they Nidus right here. They sent their Overlord through here. They sent this Overlord that was here that eventually died when they rescouted. And just put it like right here and then Nidus right here. It's only a couple hundred resources, 300 resources that they're going to lose for attempting to do that, and you have no vision here. You cannot have this much space without vision inside your base anywhere, especially if they flew over it with an Overlord. Same for Protoss, right? You need to be able to get to the point where that Nidus, the drop prism, warp prism, or whatever is just, you scouted it. Anytime you do a supply drop, unless it's explicitly intended for your build, it's bad. It means that you have screwed up, your build is out of order, you're not doing things right. Yeah, so that being said, I do really like the build. I think it's really cool. I like the fact that you're doing an off-meta build, and it worked really well for you. You took the W, and you were able to do some things to make it so your opponent struggled. That being said, your opponent made mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's not like you force them into mistakes. They don't know what you're doing because you're doing an off-meta build. You get up to the higher echelons of play, they're going to be able to deal with these kind of things much better. Or they've seen so much that they can calculate out in their head what you could build in the amount of time that you had. And they're going to say, I need 25 roaches instead of, before this fight really gets going, 16. And I'm going to have all my roaches at the front because I have vision over here, and vision down here. So I'm going to put all my roaches right here. And I'm going to have my queens lined up, and I'm going to have a concave so you can't get up, and you're just... And then if they go to my natural, or my third, I'm so far ahead it doesn't matter because I have my lings that are scouting. They know that you're just expanding. You know what, like that kind of thought process where they're going to be able to know, oh, they don't have anything at home. That 6-ling pack that I set off over here just because I have more income than you, because this guy has 830 resources. Imagine if he had these 3 larvae as lings and parked them over here. I'm using the current larva count, yada, yada, yada. And he missed a bunch of injects. So, like, you could see he doesn't even have injects going right now. He's poor. He's, like, larva starved. Even that's why he's struggling with his income. That's why he's building this 4th base in an arbitrary, I wouldn't say it's arbitrary, but in a very far location, very early while you're getting ready to all-in him. He didn't do a really good job of responding to his scouting, stuff like that. But I digress. Point being is that if you're playing against somebody that has a lot more experience, a lot better understanding, this would have completely failed. They would have either shut you down so you had no vision up here with the queens killing the medevac so you had no high ground vision, or they would have had their army positioned better so that they could collapse on you. They'd have like 10 or 20 roaches over here, or like 10 roaches over here, 10 roaches over here, the queens over here, and then they would have taken all 3 and collapsed on one big front as you get stuck on this ramp. you didn't scout, you didn't scan for it, like you didn't put a scan. I know you scanned. I think you put it over here, but you didn't scan like where you were going to attack, and you didn't scan where you were could be flanked from. Again, you had the energy, if I remember correctly. I'm actually going to jump back up here and see if you had the energy, because there's enough energy there. This should have been an orbital. You should have built that before you started the fight. Like as soon as you started microing this, before you got there, that should have been an orbital. So like you're solid like 20 seconds behind there, and that would have given you 2 scans. You'd been able to scan here, and you'd been able to scan here, killing the creep. Maybe scanning like here so you could get these creep tumors, because when you start playing the game more, or as you play the game, you learn how far the creep goes out. So you could have been like, okay, I know the creep tumor is roughly here. I need to see what's over here, so I'm going to put my scan right here. And I know that you don't have that vision, so let's like, I'm arbitrarily moving back. When you see the creep here, okay, their creep tumor is right here, I think. I'll go like out here, right? We're in the middle of nowhere. Let's imagine that, oh, we see this creep tumor. That creep is going to reach to about here when it's done. You should have a pretty good idea of where the creep's going to get to. It won't go down here because it won't make it all the way down the ramp. And I think the game doesn't last long enough for us to actually verify that. As I said, right around here, right? So I'm doing that because I've played the game enough as Zerg and as the facing them to know where this creep is going to extend to. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. This is killing me. Which means that like when you see this creep tumor, when you see this creep extend out to this location, you should know that creep tumor is right around here. And you know that you saw like the spine crawler down here, which is weird. I would have put it literally right here at the top of the ramp. That way it's a chokehold to like help with my roaches and stuff, and I can start hitting you before you can see me. Stupid decision on their behalf. I guess they were trying to protect this base down here, but they know that you don't have a third. They scouted early. They saw you doing some weird thing. They probably can discern that they needed to have a much bigger army. Like they just like didn't have the knowledge to get what needed to happen to prevent this from happening. Because look, they have 1,400 minerals and they only have 7 larvae. Their queen count is almost dead because you killed it. It was like 6, I think. So they were like short a bunch of queens too. So like, there's just all kinds of mistakes on both sides of the on both sides of the board. Point being is, work on doing a really, really good job of macroing properly. Make sure that you would make adjustments to adjust your timing for when you place buildings so that they place when you have the money. Make sure you hide important buildings that you're trying to sneak into the game, and hide those units. So when you build those ghosts, don't keep them right here. Move them like back here or something, or way up here, somewhere where they're not going to be seen. But they're close enough that you can run them over if you're going to get all in or attacked or something at the front. Because if they see like 4 or 5 Hellions, a Marine, they might try to roach all in you, and then you just bring your ghosts up and just snipe them all down and laugh. So you could just trap them in being in a crappy economic position and make them on the offensive with slow roaches to try and stop you from what you're doing. Pre-place your buildings so that you don't have to relift things that I don't need to. I've already harped on this. I'm sorry. I think you get what I'm trying to say. That being said, I really, really do like the build. I think it's a great concept. I've been trying to do something like this for a long time. In teams, I have it good enough. In 1v1, I don't. I don't do it as an all-in. I do it as a weird... I won't articulate it until I actually figure out exactly how I want to play it. But Ruff is a great mentor for understanding that concept. So go watch Ruff when he does his Terran gameplay. There's some YouTubes out there from him as well, where basically he does spooky mech, which is what you're doing in all-in spooky mech. You didn't grab your cloak. He doesn't always. You didn't grab a higher tech. You went Hellions, which is fine. Again, it's cool. You didn't do a really good job of denying scouting and making sure that you didn't get Nidist. Again, Nidist here, you're just dead. This map is one of those funky ones where like you gotta like be all over your map. You either need to be all over your opponent, making sure they're not Nidising, or you need to be like really on top of your base. You can't, on this map, you can't really hide supply depots behind your mineral line, even though if you build them back there, they're the fastest to get back to mining, which is a really good thing for certain maps, and really good to like make it so you can accelerate what you're doing and having the littlest downtime for your SCVs. But for the level of play and skill that you're at, having your supply depots out here, your engineering bay, or your armory out farther and stuff like that, so that way you can see what's going on, making sure they're not mineral creeping through here, stuff like that. Heck, having the starport like right here instead. The difference for what you did with your starport is irrelevant. Also, queuing units, like there's a lot of opportunities for improvement. That being said, I thank you for watching. GG's, and I look forward to seeing what you end up coming up with regards to improving your build, and then of course improving your skills, which we all are on that journey, even Cyril. So hope you have a good rest of the day. Bye.